understand how this software works. One thing to note though, the first part of this video is aimed at complete beginners, so if you've used any previous versions of Ableton Live, then I recommend skipping forward to 21 minutes and 42 seconds where we cover Ableton Live in more detail. So this is what Ableton Live should look like when you open up a new session, or set as it's called. One thing I'll mention first is that Ableton Live has a hint panel down here, and it's called the info view. And you can show and hide this info view with this small triangle down here in the bottom left. So this is a very useful feature that I recommend you keep open if you're a beginner. When you hover your cursor over something in Ableton Live, this info box will give you a brief description of this feature or area. For example, if I move my mouse over some items in Ableton Live, you can see here we have a brief description about these. So this is useful if you ever get stuck, so I do just recommend leaving this open whilst you're learning the software. Okay, so I'm going to go over the interface first, so you've got a rough idea of what you're looking at. As you can see, Ableton Live is split into a number of different areas, and each of these have different uses in the music production process. So the first area I want to talk about now is the browser. The browser is this area here on the left-hand side. And if you cannot see the browser, then you need to click on this small arrow in the top left, and this will open and close the browser. So the browser is used to access all of your instruments, sounds, and effects. These can be things such as software instrument presets, for example, a bass synth or keyboard sound to use on a MIDI track. We also have audio samples, for example, drum loops or melodies, which we can use on audio tracks. There's also plugins and effects to use when mixing, such as reverb, delay, or EQ. So these can be loaded onto different tracks in Ableton Live. So the browser helps make Ableton Live really quick and easy to use, as you can access files and plugins very quickly. I've just opened up another Ableton Live set to help run through how this software works. So there are two main views in Ableton Live, the session view and the arrangement view. Right now we're looking at the session view. If you're not currently looking at the same view as me, then you can swap between the two views by pressing the tab button on your computer's keyboard, or by pressing one of these little buttons over here in the top right. I'm going to focus on the session view first, which is this area here. Here we can see our different tracks listed across the session view. Each one of these columns is a different track. For example, we have a track for the bass, for the drums, the guitar, and so on and so forth. We actually have both MIDI and audio tracks, which are slightly different, but they are both used to create musical parts. Simply put, MIDI is used to digitally write in or record musical information, which is then turned into audio using a software instrument. Audio tracks are slightly different. They are used to play back audio samples, for example, drum loops, guitar, bass, or recorded vocals. On each track, you'll notice that we have a number of these little rectangles, and these are clip slots. So we create clips which hold MIDI or audio information, and these can be used to store your different musical ideas. Clips can then be played back to jam out different ideas to help you build a song. So you can loop clips or play them back at different times to help you come up with musical arrangements. So to play back a clip, simply press on the little play icon on the clip. Let me just show you this now. You can pause the clips playing back by pressing the spacebar, or stop them by pressing the stop button on the track. You can start and stop clips at different times during playback to start structuring your ideas. You can also play multiple clips at once by pressing the scene play button over here. So instead of just playing one individual clip, it will play all of the clips in the same row, or scene as it's called. So you can stop all clips with the stop all clips button down here, or just pause them with the spacebar. So playing back clips in the session view is a really intuitive way of creating music, but you can then use the arrangement view to structure these ideas into a song. So now if I swap over to the arrangement view with this little icon in the top right, you'll be able to see the more traditional timeline. Now you'll notice our tracks are no longer listed across the top of the page, they are flipped and they are down the right hand side. So in the session view, all of our tracks are listed vertically, whereas in the arrangement view, the tracks are flipped and they are listed horizontally. If you've ever used other digital audio workstations in the past, such as Logic Pro or Pro Tools, you'll notice they look more similar to this view. Along the top of the arrangement view, we have our timeline measured in bars, and at the bottom we have our timeline measured in minutes and seconds. As you can see here, we have a number of clips already arranged on the timeline. I'll just play this back. You can do so with the play icon at the top of the screen. However, if your tracks are grayed out, you'll need to press the Back to Arrangement button, which is the small orange button over here. And this will allow you to play back in the arrangement view. You can pause playback with either the spacebar or the stop icon up here at the top. You can move the position of the playhead by clicking in the arrangement. Or you can instantly start playback by clicking on the scrub area at the top here. So when you're in the arrangement view, you organize your clips into a specific order on the timeline to structure a song. This is different to the session view, where the clips can be playback or looped in any order. So the session view holds your musical ideas, whereas the arrangement view is used to structure your different ideas into a song. So the general workflow I would recommend in Ableton Live is that you come up with most of your musical ideas in the session view, and then you structure them into a song in the arrangement view. One thing to note, you don't have to use the session view in Ableton Live. Just like many other digital audio workstations, you can simply come up with all of your ideas in the arrangement view if you like. However, in my opinion, if you don't use the session view, then you're really missing out on one of the best features of Ableton Live. Don't worry if you're a little confused at the moment, we're going to be going over all of this again in more detail in future lectures. I just wanted you to get familiar with the workflow first. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I hope now you're starting to understand how Ableton Live works, but again, we're going to cover this in a lot more detail later on in this course. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hi there, and welcome to this video where we're going to continue looking at the basics of Ableton Live 11. So we've shown you the session view and arrangement view, and now we're going to have a look at creating clips. Firstly, let's create an audio clip. You can record audio directly into a clip, but to keep things simple for now, I'm going to choose a sample from the browser. So let's go over to the browser and choose a sample. So here we have samples, and this is where audio files are stored in the browser. We can listen to the different samples that are available by clicking with the mouse once or scrolling down with the arrow keys on the keyboard. To stop the audition playing back, just press the spacebar. I want to choose a shaker sample though, so I'm going to type in shaker in the search up here. Now, once you find a sample that you like, all you have to do is drag the sample over to an audio track and drop it into an empty clip slot. And this will create an audio clip. Let's now have a look at the clip view. To access it, just double click on a clip. And the clip view is this area down here. In here we can see the audio waveform of the clip that's been selected. Okay, let's now find another audio clip in the browser. I'm going to now type in the word bouncy beat as I know the sample that I want to use. Okay, I'm going to select this drum loop and let's drag it over onto an empty clip slot onto the other audio track. Okay, so now we have a couple of clips. Let's now play them back. I'm just going to turn these down as they were quite loud. Okay, so now let's create another type of clip, and this time we're going to use a MIDI track. When working with MIDI, we need to do things a little differently. So what I'm going to do is double click on an empty clip slot on the MIDI track. This will open up the MIDI note editor in the clip view at the bottom here. The MIDI note editor is where we can write in and edit MIDI. MIDI allows us to write musical information to be played back by Ableton Live. You can record in MIDI using either a MIDI device or your computer keyboard, but we'll be going over this in detail later on in this course. Okay, I'm just going to quickly draw in a chord. I'll do so by double-clicking to draw in some notes. I'm just going to drag to resize these, so they're 1 bar in length. Okay, so now let's try and play back this MIDI clip. I'll press the play button on this clip. Notice how we cannot actually hear anything while the clip is being played back. This is because MIDI tracks need an instrument to create sound. So I'll just quickly show you how to load an instrument onto a MIDI track. To do so, go over to your browser and then find an instrument. So let's click on Instruments here in the browser. Notice how we don't see anything at the moment, and that's because our search is still active. So I'm just going to hit this X in the search bar at the top to reset the search. Okay, so here we have our different instruments. We can look at the different preset sounds that are available for each instrument by clicking on the small triangle next to each instrument. See here we have a number of different instrument sounds. I'm just going to use Simpler as this is available on all editions of Ableton Live. Just like with audio, you can audition sounds by clicking once or scrolling down with the arrow keys. Once you've found a sound that you like, you can simply click and drag the instrument onto your MIDI track. At the bottom here, you'll notice now that we see a different window. This is called the device view. The device view shows us the instrument that's loaded onto our MIDI track. Here we can make changes to how our instrument sounds. You can swap between the device view and the clip view with this tab at the bottom here. This allows you to jump between the MIDI note editor and the instrument that is loaded on the track. When I play this clip back once again, you'll notice we will now be able to hear the MIDI information that we previously wrote in. This is because this MIDI track now has an instrument loaded onto it. Audio tracks simply play audio samples, so they don't need an instrument. Right, so let's create another MIDI clip on this track now. So I'll double click on an empty clip slot, and now in the MIDI note editor, I'm going to draw in a few notes. So same again, I'm going to double click to draw in some notes. Then select these notes and extend them so they're 1 bar. Okay, so now we've got a few clips. Let's play back some of them and start making a rough arrangement. So as you can see there, it's really quick and easy to start building up a song idea using the clips in the session view. Right, so now let's add a bass part to this groove. So I'm going to look in the browser again and find another sound. Let's use a simpler instrument again, and this time I'm going to open up the bass folder. I'm going to use this one here called B-Bass. Let's drag this over to MIDI track 1. Let's now double click on an empty clip slot to create a new clip and to open up the MIDI note editor. Let's now write in a note. I'm just going to move this clip down now to the 3rd clip slot. Right, let's play these parts back. I'll start off by playing back this first scene. Right now, I've got a few different tracks and we've come up with a very basic arrangement. Now I'll show you how to get this into the arrangement view. So all we have to do is click on this arrangement record button at the top here and then start playing back our clips. Before you press record, I'd recommend pressing the stop all clips button. Now when we hit record, we should have a 1 by counting and we'll be able to record our ideas into the arrangement view. So let's hit record and record this into the arrangement view. So once you've finished playing the arrangement, just press the space bar. Now if we go back to the arrangement view, we'll be able to see the clips that we just recorded. To listen back to what you recorded, make sure you press the back to arrangement button, which is this orange button here. So as you can see there, we can start editing and building upon these ideas to turn them into a song. Hi there and welcome to this video where I'm going to show you the basics of some of the track controls. So if you ever want to listen to one track on its own, then you can press the solo button on the track. Let me just show you now. You can adjust the volume of a track by clicking and dragging this slider left or right. You can adjust the panning of a track, so how far left or right it appears in the stereo image. And you can double click to go back to the default. You can deactivate a track by clicking on this orange icon here, and this effectively mutes the track. And you can click once more to reactivate the track. Okay, so something else to note. We can also access these controls from within the session view as well. So let's go back over to the session view. As you can see here on the track, we have our different icons. So we have our volume as a fader here. We have a panning as a dial. And we also have our solo and deactivate icons here. Whatever changes you make in the session view will also affect the arrangement view and vice versa. Right, so that's the very basics of Ableton Live. We're going to start creating a new song from scratch in the next section, where we'll be going into a lot more detail of the processes involved when creating music in Ableton Live. So this may seem quite complex right now, but I just wanted to give you an overview of how Ableton Live works before we actually get into making music. Hopefully now you should have a basic understanding of the workflow of this software. However, don't worry if not, we're going to go over all of this again in a lot more detail in the following videos in this course. In the next part of this video, Ian Alexander will take over and start making a song from scratch, going over many features and functions of Ableton Live to get you started making music right away. This video is just a condensed version of the first part of our complete Ableton Live 11 course. In the full course, we go over numerous topics such as songwriting, mixing, Ableton Live instruments, and much more. To access our complete course, which is over 20 hours long, just check out the link in the description below this video.
Hi there, it's Ian Alexander here. I'm now going to take you through the steps involved when creating a song in Ableton Live. I'm going to go over the basics first, so feel free to skip forwards using the timestamps if you like. So first of all, I'm going to show you how to open up a new set so we can start from scratch. So just go over to File and down to New Live Set. You can also use the shortcut Command and N on Mac or Control and N on Windows. Okay, so this is what a new set looks like. Now, the first thing I want to do is set the tempo of my project. The tempo is the speed or beats per minute of the music. The genre of music I'm going to create is trap, so I've got a good idea of the tempo that I'd like to use. Different styles and genres of music will often have different tempos, so you don't need to use the same as me. However, if you want to follow along and make the same song, then I'd recommend choosing the same. So to change the tempo, go up to the top here where you can see these numbers. This here says 120, so that's 120 beats per minute. To change it, you can just click and drag up or down. So if I pull it down, we'll be slowing down the tempo. If I increase it, we'll be increasing it. You can also click on this box and type in a number and then hit enter, and this will save it as your tempo. Now, to hear the speed of your tempo, you'll need to turn on the metronome. To do so, go to this icon here, click on it once, and it'll light up orange. Now, when you press the spacebar, you can hear the metronome at 300 beats per minute. To stop the metronome, press spacebar once again. I'm just going to click on this and bring down the tempo. Now, when I press the spacebar again, you can hear the tempo is much slower. You can also start and stop playback with the play and stop buttons here. Right, another way to change tempo is by using the tap tempo. This is a really handy feature which allows you to click a button at the speed you would like your song to be at. So, for example, you can listen to a reference track and tap in time with it to match the tempo. So if I click on this tap icon here, so as you can see there, when I was clicking on this tap tempo icon, the tempo of my project has actually changed. So that's two ways to change the tempo of your project. I'm just going to click here and type in 170. As I mentioned before, that's the tempo that I want to use for my song. And then hit enter. So it's not essential that you change your tempo before you start creating a song, but as I say, it does make it a little bit easier to get a vibe for the song you're creating. I'm now going to go over the differences between audio and MIDI tracks while I start building up some parts to this song. Right, first of all, let's look at audio tracks. That's these ones here. So audio tracks hold audio files. These can be pre-recorded samples or sounds that come with Ableton Live, or even recordings created by you. So all you have to do is add an audio file to one of these clip slots and you'll be able to play it back. Audio is in some ways more simple than MIDI, as you don't have to load a software instrument onto the track. As I say, you simply just drop the file onto the track and you'll be able to play it back. I'll quickly show you an example. So I'm going to go over to my browser, which is this area here, and I'm going to select Samples. Samples are audio files. Now I'm just going to listen to a couple of these and find one that I like. If you want to stop the sample preview, hit the spacebar. If you can't actually hear the preview, make sure this little headphone icon is illuminated. You can do so by clicking on it. Right, I'm just going to find an audio loop. So I'm just going to search my browser and type in loop. Okay, that one's fine. Now, all you have to do is click and drag it over to your audio track and drop it into one of the empty clip slots. This has now created an audio clip. You can play it back by clicking on this play button here. And stop it by pressing the stop button down here. You can also pause the loop by pressing the spacebar. You can open up your clip by double-clicking on it, and this will open up the sample display in the clip view, which is this area down here. Here we can see the audio waveform. What this is a visual representation of the audio signal. If I play my clip back now, you can see the playhead moving along, showing how far through the clip we are. Right, I'm just going to go into the browser and find another loop. This time, I'm going to search for a percussive loop. So, I'm looking for a tambourine sound. So I'll go into the browser and start typing in tambourine. Okay, I'll choose that one. I'm just going to drag this into a new clip. So, as you can see, you can have multiple different clips on the same audio track, and these will both play back their individual audio files. One thing you may notice, when I played back the preview in the browser, it is actually at a different speed to the clip in our session. This is because Ableton automatically time stretches the loops so they fit in time with your set. This is because of something called warping. If your loop is not in time with your project, just open up the clip by double-clicking, and in the sample editor, just make sure this warp button is illuminated. If I play it back without warp selected, it's going to play back at its original tempo. Right, so adding audio clips is as simple as that. Once you've loaded a clip onto a track, you can move it around into any other empty clip slot. You can even move clips between different audio tracks. To delete your clips, you can simply select them and press backspace, or right-click and select delete. So there's absolutely loads of different samples that come with Ableton Live, and this can be a really quick and easy way of making music. Something else that you can do in Ableton is record in your own audio clips. This is a very useful feature. I'm not going to cover that just yet, as I want to go over MIDI first. So, MIDI tracks are slightly different to audio tracks, and this is because they contain MIDI information. MIDI tracks allow you to create music using virtual instruments. You can write in or record MIDI information, which can be manipulated or edited at any time in the MIDI note editor. This information is then played back with a virtual or software instrument which creates the sound. For example, you can use drum kits, synthesizers, or any third-party instruments you may have. So, an audio file is a pre-recorded sample which is simply played back on the audio track. MIDI tracks have software instruments loaded onto them, and sounds are then triggered using MIDI. So, at the moment, we've got our audio clip opened up, and we can see the audio file. If I double-click on an empty clip slot on a MIDI track, you'll see here the MIDI note editor has opened up. This is where we can write in our MIDI note information. Any MIDI notes that we now draw in will be stored in this clip. So, in the MIDI editor, you'll notice we can see a piano keyboard flipped vertically. This is where you can write in musical notes to be played back by your software instrument. The pitch of the notes is represented vertically, and the timing is represented horizontally. I'm going to go over the MIDI note editor in a lot of detail in future lectures, but right now I just want to show you how to load on a software instrument. I'm just going to create a basic chord with the notes C, E, and G. I'm going to select them all by clicking and dragging over them, and extend the length so it's the full length of the bar. To play back a MIDI clip, just like an audio clip, you simply press the play button. You'll notice there my audio clip also started playing back at the same time. That's because I hadn't pressed the stop button on the audio track first. Now if I play this MIDI clip once again, you'll notice we can't actually hear anything. If you look down here, you'll be able to see these yellow dots illuminating. So that's just showing us that MIDI signal is being received, but you'll notice we couldn't hear anything. And that's because a MIDI track which has not been assigned a software instrument will make no sound. MIDI is simply musical note information, and each MIDI track needs to convert this information into sound using a software instrument. So this is where we need to look at the browser once again. So I'm going to go over to the instrument category in the browser. I'm just going to press close because we don't actually have a tambourine instrument available to us, so we weren't able to see all the options available to us. The list down here is displaying all the instruments that we have available in Ableton Live. You may have less instruments if you're using a basic version of Ableton. This version is Sweet. I'm just going to go over to Simpler because this instrument is available on all versions of Ableton Live. So to look at the presets, click on the little arrow to open the drop-down box. Here we can see some different sounds. I'm just going to go to Piano and Keys and choose Simplest Piano. Since recording this video, Ableton Live has changed the name of this instrument preset to Grand Piano Single Sample. If you'd like to use the same sound as me, please choose this preset name instead. So we can hear the preview of it being played back there. Right, so now what I need to do is click and drag this onto my MIDI track. This won't actually go in a clip slot, it just needs to be dropped anywhere onto the track and it will load this instrument onto the MIDI track. We'll be able to see now this window is opened up and this is displaying our software instrument. Now if I play this clip back once again, we can hear there the chord is being played back. So looking back down at this window at the software instrument, this is where we can make changes to our sound. The area that we can see our software instrument in is called the device view. If you want to swap between the device view and the MIDI note editor, go down to the bottom right and click on this tab here. This will open up the MIDI note editor once again. You can also use the keyboard shortcut Shift and Tab to swap between these two views. Now, something else I'll mention quickly is if we look at our two different MIDI tracks now, you'll be able to tell that the one with an instrument loaded onto it looks different to the one without. If I go back to the device view down here, click on my instrument and press backspace, this will delete it. Watch what happens to my MIDI track now. You can see there our meter and dials have disappeared. Now when I play the clip back once again, we're just seeing these yellow dots light up and we're not getting any sound. If I put my instrument back on again, you'll see there the meter has reappeared, and when I play the clip, you can hear a chord being played back. So just be aware, if your MIDI track ever looks like this, you won't get any sound. So just to clarify, an audio track will always be able to play back its audio clips, whereas a MIDI track needs a software instrument. Audio tracks will always have the meter and dials displaying down here. Whatever sample you load onto your audio track will be exactly what you hear. So if you're a complete beginner, you'll now hopefully understand the differences between MIDI and audio. I'm now going to show you how to use a computer MIDI keyboard. So just like in other digital audio workstations, you don't have to write in MIDI notes. You can also play them in. I'm not going to show you how to record MIDI just yet, but I want to show you how you can set up your MIDI keyboard and the really handy feature, which is the computer MIDI keyboard. So, if you don't have a MIDI controller, you can actually play in notes using your computer's QWERTY keyboard. So, all you need to do is click on this little icon at the top right here, so it's illuminated orange. This shows that your computer MIDI keyboard is now activated. Now, what you need to do is select the track that you'd like to trigger notes on, and then make sure this icon down here, which is the record arm button, make sure that is lit up red. Just do so by clicking on it. Now this track is armed and ready to receive information. So the main keys to worry about at the moment is the middle row of keys on your computer keyboard. So that is A all the way up to L. If I play the letter A on my keyboard now, it's playing the note C on my MIDI keyboard. I'm just going to open up the MIDI note editor by double-clicking on this clip so you can see which note we're playing. See now, we're playing C3. You can change the octave by pressing Z or X to move down or up. So if I press Z once, and then play the A on my keyboard, we're playing C an octave down. Press X, we go up an octave. And we can go back down. So with this, you can play chords or notes on your MIDI track. You can toggle the computer MIDI keyboard on and off by using the shortcut M on your keyboard. See, when I'm pressing M, the icon at the top right is turning off and on. So, just like a real piano keyboard, we have our row of white notes, then we also have the black notes just above. The black notes start from the letter W. Next, I'm going to show you how to set up your MIDI keyboard or MIDI device. So, let me first mention what a MIDI controller actually is. A MIDI controller is a hardware device that allows you to transmit MIDI notes or MIDI data. Some MIDI devices also have buttons, sliders, or dials that you can control other parameters with, for example, pitch bend or modulation. Right, so if you have a MIDI keyboard or MIDI device, you'll need to make sure that it is set up correctly in Ableton Live. So to do this, we need to go over to Preferences. On Windows, go up to Options and choose Preferences, and on a Mac, go over to Live and then select Preferences. Right, in your Preferences, you need to navigate to the Link Tempo MIDI tab here. And it should look something like this. I'm not going to go over everything in detail now, I'm just going to show you what you need to know to use your MIDI controller. Once you're at the screen, make sure your MIDI controller is plugged in. I'm just going to plug mine in now. Right, I've got an Axiom Air Mini 32. And as you can see, it has automatically recognised it in Ableton. So, all you need to do is make sure that these track buttons are selected. You may as well select them all, but the most important is the MIDI in. So that's already sorted. Now, if I go back to my track and make sure my track is selected, record armed, and has a software instrument loaded onto it, then when I play some keys on my keyboard, we should be able to hear. Something else to check, if you can't hear anything, make sure monitor is set to auto mode. Okay, great, that's working straight away. Now, whenever you select a different MIDI track, if it has an instrument loaded onto it, you'll be able to hear sounds. So I'm going to drag software instrument onto this other track. Now it's selected and record armed. If I play some notes, so we can control either of the MIDI tracks. Right, so that was very easy. It actually set it up automatically. Now I'm just going to unplug this device and show you how to set up in a slightly different way. So if we go back to Preferences again, so that's Options, Preferences on Windows, or Live, then Preferences on a Mac. Now we can see this control surface is no longer active. So I'm just going to set it back to its default. Now I'm just going to plug in my other MIDI controller. This time, it's the Impact GX61. And this isn't actually recognised by Ableton. See, it's not popped up in the control surface box. It's also not listed down here. So don't worry, if this is the case with your MIDI controller, you'll still be able to use it. Just make sure you've got track selected on in MIDI 1. Right, once you've got track selected, you should be able to play MIDI notes back. So I'm just going to close Preferences and try it out. Make sure my track's selected. And there we can see our new MIDI controller is working. So it's really easy to do this in Ableton. I just wanted to go over this quickly early on so you're all set up. I just want to show you one thing quickly. So I'm going to go back to my Preferences. If you're a more experienced Ableton user and you have an advanced MIDI controller, I'd recommend going back to Preferences and checking a few more boxes. I won't go over these settings in detail now, but these settings will enable you to utilize more features of your MIDI controller. You can do things such as start or stop playback in Ableton using your controller, or also map different faders or dials to parameters within Ableton Live, or even trigger clips in Ableton with buttons on your controller. So you may as well select all of these buttons here if you have an advanced controller. This will just enable all of its features. Okay, your MIDI controller should now be set up to follow along with the rest of the class. Don't worry, if you do not have a MIDI controller, you can always use a computer MIDI keyboard, and this will allow you to play in notes on your computer's QWERTY keyboard. Now we've gone over the essentials and you're all set up, let's actually start creating a song. So first of all, I'm going to delete the MIDI clip that we created on the piano part, as we just don't need it for the song. I'm also going to delete these 2 audio tracks, as we don't need those at the moment. So to delete a track, select it by clicking on the name at the top, and then press backspace. You can also delete a track by right-clicking and going to delete. Okay, I'm going to add a bass sound to this track here. So I'm just going to go to Instruments, go to Simpler, Bass, and then find a bass sound. Okay, this one seems fine. So what I'm going to do is click and drag it onto this track. You'll notice we already have an instrument there, so when I drag over this new instrument, it will replace it. See, we've now got the B bass on this track. Right, I'm just going to create a new clip by double-clicking on an empty clip slot on this track. The MIDI note editor should then open up. Right, I'll just quickly go over some of the features of the MIDI note editor. At the top, we have our timeline. So over on the left, at bar number 1, we have beat 1 of the first bar. Here's beat 2, here's beat 3, here's beat 4. And we have other beat divisions in between. Over on the left, we can see our keyboard, which is flipped vertically, representing our pitch. If you want to hear the pitch of these notes, you just need to activate this headphone icon here by clicking on it. When it is blue, if you click on a note, you'll be able to hear the pitch. You can move down to a lower octave by scrolling on the MIDI note editor. So the most simple way to draw a note is by double-clicking. So we can edit our notes in a variety of different ways. Clicking and dragging the centre of the note allows us to move it either in time or pitch. So to change the timing of a note, click and drag left or right, and to change the pitch, click and drag up or down. Hovering over the start or end of the note allows us to change the length by clicking and dragging. You can either make it longer or shorter. Right, now I've got this note the full length of the bar, I'm just going to play back this clip. So I'll just click on this play icon next to the clip. You can stop it by clicking on the stop icon here, or pressing the spacebar to pause. So when playing it back, you'll notice that this clip is 1 bar in length and it continues to loop. When making music, it's common to use 4 or 8 bar loops. So I'm going to change this clip so it's 8 bars in length, as I already have an idea of the bass part I'm going to write. To change the length of your clip, you can simply click and drag this little arrow on the right-hand side. You can make it shorter by dragging left, or longer by dragging to the right. One thing that's important to note is be very careful of where your clip ends. If it's too long or too short, it will not loop correctly and your music will go out of time. So we'd need to drag this over so it ends exactly at bar 9. As you can see, this might take quite a while as it doesn't do it very quickly. So a better way to do this is go over to the left-hand side here and see where it says length. Click on this number and type in the length that you'd like. I want it to be 8 bars long, so I'll just type in 8 and hit enter. You can see now our clip is 8 bars. You can adjust the horizontal zoom of the MIDI note editor by using the key commands plus and minus on your keyboard. So if I press plus, we'll zoom in, and minus will zoom out. You can also hover the mouse at the top here until this magnifying glass icon appears. If you then click and drag up or down, it will zoom in and zoom out. To zoom vertically, hold Alt on Windows or Option on Mac and scroll. Again, you can also zoom vertically if you hover the mouse over to the left-hand side here. When the magnifying glass appears, you can click and drag left and right. I'm just going to zoom in a tiny bit more and start drawing in my notes. So the first note I want is an F. So I'm just going to drag this down to F1. The letter on the note dictates the pitch, and the number dictates the octave. Now I'm just going to click and drag the end of this note so that it's 2 bars in length. So we want to go to the end of the second bar. Right, if I play this clip back now, we can see there we're slowly moving through the clip. And it's looped back to the start again. Right, so let's draw in some more notes. This time I'm going to draw in a G. So I'm going to double click here at the start of bar 3. And then I'll extend this note out so it's again 2 bars in length. Now there's a handy feature to speed up the process of drawing notes. You can actually copy notes. So if you click and drag a note, it'll move. But if you hold down the Control key on Windows or the Option key on Mac while dragging, you'll see here this little plus icon has appeared. Now if I let go of the mouse before I release the Option key, it has copied the note over. Now I'm going to change the pitch of this so it's an A. Another way to quickly duplicate a note is right-click and select Duplicate. Now we just have the same note starting where this one ends. So I'm going to click and drag this up to the right pitch now. Okay, let's play that back. Okay, great. Now, something else to be aware of. If you ever make a mistake when working in the MIDI note editor, so for example, if you accidentally duplicated a note, you could just press Command-Z on a Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo your last step. If you continue to press Control-Z or Command-Z, it will undo the previous steps. If you've pressed undo too many times, you can actually use the redo function. If you want to redo, you can use the key command Shift Command Z on a Mac or Shift Control Z on Windows. This will redo the previous step. If you already have some music theory knowledge, you can come up with your own parts. However, if you're a complete beginner, feel free to copy mine. Right, I'm now going to create another new part. So I'm going to close the MIDI note editor by clicking on this arrow in the bottom right here. Now I'm going to go into my browser and choose a new preset for another track. So this time I'm going to access an instrument from the core library. I'm going to use the core library as this has lots of sounds that are available in most editions of Ableton Live. To access it, go down to Places and click on Packs. Then click on the drop-down box on Core Library and go down to Racks. Here I'm going to choose Instrument Racks and I'm going to open up this folder here, Mallets. Right, I'll just scroll through a couple of these and see if there's one I like. Okay, that one sounds quite good. So what I'm going to do now is load this onto our other track. Another way of loading an instrument onto a track, rather than clicking dragging, is select the track that you'd like to load the instrument onto, and then just double click on the instrument. It's now loaded on this track. Okay, so for this part, I want an arpeggio style part. Something like this. Okay, so I'm going to draw this MIDI in once again. So I'm going to create a new clip by double-clicking on an empty clip slot. And now we can see the MIDI note editor. Now we already have our bass line, and something you need to be aware of when writing music is the key that you're in. For this song, to keep things simple, I'm going to be using the key C major. This is often considered the easiest key to understand as it does not use any sharps or flats, which are the black notes on the keyboard. So in C major, we only use the white notes. Now, one feature that's new for Ableton Live 11, which I really like, is a scale feature in the MIDI note editor. So if we go over to the left here, you can see this box that says scale. If you click on this, you can choose the scale that you'd like to be in. Here, it's already set to C major. Now, any notes that are in the scale that we want will be highlighted. So as we can see here, all of the white notes have been highlighted blue. If I was to change this to a different key, for example, G sharp major, we can see now different notes have been highlighted, lots of the sharps and flats. So this is a really great feature for beginners, which helps you understand which notes to use. One other thing I'll mention real quickly while we're looking at this feature is if you click on the scale button up here, it actually removes any notes that are not in the scale. So now we're only seeing the white notes. Personally, I wouldn't recommend using this, as it's good to have the whole piano roll open to help you understand where all the different notes are. So I'm just going to disable it for now. Feel free to use it if you like, but your music theory will improve quicker if you get used to looking at a piano roll like this. If I look at my bass part, we can just check to make sure we're using the correct notes. So I'll activate the scale feature in this clip, and there we can see we've only used these white notes here. Okay, let's start writing in our new part. So these are the notes I wanted to play. As you can see there, when I was playing notes on my keyboard, they were lighting up in the MIDI note editor. This also works when using the computer MIDI keyboard if you don't have a MIDI controller. So now I know the first note I want to write in is this F, so I'm going to double click to draw it in here. The next note I want to draw in is a C. I'm going to draw this in 1/8 note away from this F. So the F is the first eighth note of the bar. The second eighth note starts here. 2/16 notes are the length of 1/8 note. At the moment, our grid is set to 16th notes. We know this because there's 16 beat divisions in this bar. Right, I'm going to draw the C here, the D on beat 2 of the bar. I'm going to draw a G just here. Right, let's hear that back. Okay, great. I'm going to draw in a few more notes now. Right, let's listen to this back. Okay, that sounds fine. One thing you may notice, each of these notes are exactly the same volume. So, in Ableton Live, you can actually adjust the velocity of each note. The velocity determines how hard a note is played. So, with a high velocity, the note will be played very hard and will therefore be louder. With a low velocity, the notes will be played back more quietly. So, to adjust the velocity, we need to go down this little window here. If you can't see it, just make sure this arrow is pointing out to the right, and that this top icon here is illuminated orange. Now, if you hover the mouse over, we'll get this icon and we can make the velocity window slightly larger. So these bars here represent the velocity for each note. As we can see, they're all exactly the same. Now, I'm just going to adjust the velocity for some of these slightly so we can hear the difference. Right, let's hear that back. See, it just sounds a little bit more natural now the notes aren't all being played back at the exact same velocity. Little changes like this can make a big difference to your song. So far, I've only shown you how to play back one clip at a time, but we can actually play back both clips at the same time if we press the play button over on the right-hand side here. This is the scene play button. The scene is the row of clips. So we can see the numbers on the side here are numbering each scene. So when I play this back, it's going to play both of these. Let's have a listen. Notice when we're playing that back, this part seemed to clash with the bass a little. So what I'm going to do is turn this MIDI clip into an 8-bar clip so we can add some more notes and vary them slightly. So to do so, I'm just going to go over to length here, click and then type in 8. Then when I hit enter, we now have an 8-bar loop. Now I'm just going to select these 6 notes here, then hold Option on a Mac or Control on Windows and click and drag them over. This will copy all of the notes. Now let's have a listen back. I'm going to press the Master Stop button now to stop all clips so I can listen back to this clip on its own once more. Okay, great, that sounds fine. Now you may have noticed when I copied those over, it didn't just copy the notes, it also copied the velocity information. So duplicating notes can be quicker than drawing them in individually as it saves you adjusting velocity once again. Right, I'm just going to show you another way that you can copy your notes. So I'm going to press Command A on Mac or Control A on Windows to select all of my notes. Now I'm going to press Command C or Control C on Windows. Now I'm going to go and click at the top of the bar here in this grey area to set the marker to this point. Now when I press Command V on Mac or Control V on Windows, it will paste them to this new position. Right, so let's listen back once more. Now we've got the exact same part once again. I'm just going to change the pitch of this note here so it fits with the bass part a little better. So I'm just going to move it up to a G. I'm going to paste these again once more at bar 5. So I'm going to click on this dark grey area here to set the marker and press paste once again, which is Command V on a Mac or Control V on Windows. And this time I'm just going to move that first note once again, but up to an A. Let's go to bar 7 and paste again. So I'll click here and press Command V. This time I'm going to move this first note to a B. And now we've got an 8-bar loop. So let's listen to this back with the bass by clicking on the play button on the scene. Right, that sounds much better. We've now got an arpeggiated part in time with our bass. Okay, so now we've written in a couple of musical parts, you should have a basic understanding of MIDI. Now we can move on to some more advanced features. So a huge part of music production is recording. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can record MIDI into clips. So first of all, let's create a new track. So I'm going to go up to Create and select Insert MIDI Track. I'm going to add a new instrument, and this time I want to choose a pad sound. So this is going to be playing back some long held chords. So I'm going to go to Packs, Core Library, Devices, Instruments, and now I'm going to choose Simpler. In here we have some pad sounds. So I'm just going to play a couple of these back and see which ones I like. Okay, that one sounds fine. So I'm just going to select the track that I want to load it onto, and double-click on the instrument. Now this instrument is loaded onto this track. Now to record in, we're going to need to use the computer MIDI keyboard or a MIDI controller. So make sure your computer MIDI keyboard is activated by clicking on this icon up here so it's illuminated. Or alternatively, make sure your MIDI controller is set up. Right, so the first thing we need to do is make sure we've got the track selected that we'd like to record onto, and make sure it is record armed. So this icon here should be lit up red. Now, if you play some notes on your computer MIDI keyboard, you should be getting signal. Alternatively, if you're using a MIDI keyboard, just double check with this. Right, one thing you may notice, on this track, we actually have little circles on the left-hand side. So when recording MIDI into a clip, you don't actually need to create a new clip first. All we've got to do is hit this record icon, and that will record MIDI information into a new clip. If these are still stop buttons, your track is not record enabled. Notice when I hit the record enable button on the other tracks, these squares turn into circles. So that is the track that is ready to record. When I press this record button, we'll hear the metronome clicking 4 times. Right now, I don't want to hear these 2 clips being played back when I hit record, so I'm just going to go and click on the Stop All Clips button over here. Okay, so now when I hit this record icon, we're going to hear a 1-bar count in from the metronome, and then it'll start recording. You'll notice there, when the count-in stopped, the clip started recording. I didn't actually play anything till after 3 bars in. So something you'll probably want to do when recording is activate the metronome so you can keep in time. To turn the metronome on, simply click on this icon here, and this will glow orange. The metronome will now continue while recording. One thing to note, so if you didn't have any time before the clip started recording, make sure you go into your metronome settings by clicking on the little drop-down arrow here. We can select different options for the metronome. Here we have our count-in, so you can have none, 1 bar, 2 bars, or 4 bars. We can also change the sound and the rhythm of the metronome. There's also a handy feature here which says enable only while recording. So this means you'll only hear the metronome when you're recording. You won't hear it during normal playback. Right, I'm just going to delete this clip because I recorded the part in very badly. So I'll click on the clip and press backspace. If you do want to hear your other clips while you're recording, just press play on the scene on the right-hand side, and then press the space bar to stop playback. These clips will now be activated, so when I hit record, they will also play. This is often vital when recording. Okay, I'm now going to record in a chord for 8 bars. Okay, let's hit record. Okay, great. We can see the notes here that we've recorded in. One thing to mention, if you do make a mistake when recording, you can press Command-Z on a Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo the recording. Right, so let's look at the MIDI that we've recorded. First thing you may notice is I haven't actually played it bang on in time. It's not starting right at the beginning. You'll also notice, at the end, we've gone past the 8-bar mark. So this clip is now too long. So if I was to play this alongside my bass and arpeggio parts, as this loop is 1 bar longer, they would not be looping in sync with each other. So I'm just going to correct the timing of these notes. So I'm just going to click and drag these all to the start. Sometimes it's worth zooming in to make sure you're accurate with this. The shortcut to do so is a plus button on your keyboard. I want these notes to all end right at the end of this bar. Now what we need to do is change the loop length, so again it's exactly 8 bars. This time, instead of typing in a number, I'm simply going to click and drag this back. Alright, let's play them all back together. Okay, we've got another 8-bar loop which fits with the other parts. So that's the easiest way to record MIDI into Ableton Live. I'm now going to talk you through grid settings. So if you open up the MIDI note editor by double-clicking on a clip, then right-click on the MIDI note editor and go down to this section here, we'll be able to see Adaptive Grid and Fixed Grid with a number of different options. At the moment, we're using an Adaptive Grid setting, Narrow. This is the default. So, if you notice, as we zoom right in, we get finer increments where we can snap notes to the grid. If I zoom back out again, we'll see there we have less and less increments. So right now, this is the smallest note I can draw in, but if I zoom in on that, I can actually split it up over 16 times. So this can be useful, as when you're writing in MIDI, you can make finer adjustments to note positioning. So we do have other adaptive grid settings, and the amount of note increments there are vary depending on the zoom once again. Right, let's look at something else. Let's look at fixed grid. If I select one 32nd note on the fixed grid, no matter how much we're zoomed, we're always going to have the options to draw in notes in very fine increments. If I choose a different one, for example, half a bar, you can see there we've only got 2 grid markers in each bar. So if I double click for a note here, it's going to make a note that is half bar in length. Now if I show you another example, quarter note, then we can draw in 4 notes in each bar. Again, it doesn't matter how much we zoom in, that is the finest increment we have. You can position notes to be in different points. However, it won't snap into the right position like it would if it was on a finer increment. See now, we can have each note snap perfectly to 1/8 of a bar. In this MIDI clip, I could just set it to 4 bars or even 8 bars, because this is an 8-bar clip and each note is being held the whole time. So if I was to double click to draw a new note in now, it will be 8 bars in length. If I went over to this arpeggiated part here, you'll see there if we chose fixed grid on a large amount, we just wouldn't be able to draw the notes in as finely as we need to. So, depending what type of part you're writing in will determine which grid setting you should choose. This is why adaptive grid is often a good option. So I hope you now understand how you can adjust the grid settings in Ableton Live. I wanted to show you this before I go over quantizing, as it should help you understand how this feature works a little better. The next thing I'm going to look at is how to correct the timing of MIDI notes using quantizing. So, first of all, I'm going to record in one more new part. I quite like the sound which we had on this track, so I'm going to duplicate it. To do so, right-click on the track and go over to Duplicate. You can also use the shortcut Command-D on a Mac or Control-D on Windows. Now, this new track will have the same sound as this last one. I'm just going to delete this clip as I don't need it. Okay, so we just need to set up the recording once again. So if you're using a MIDI controller, make sure it's plugged in and set up in your preferences. Or if you're using a computer MIDI keyboard, make sure it's activated up here. Now, select the track that you'd like to record onto. That's this one. And I'm going to press the record arm button. Now, these are turned into little circles, so we should be ready to record. Again, just make sure monitor is set to auto. Now if you play some notes on your keyboard, we can hear there that we're ready to record. Right, I'm just going to go to my metronome settings and make a little change. I feel like I'd rather have a 2-bar count in rather than just the single bar. This will give me a bit of time to get ready to start playing. I'm also going to turn the click on so we hear it while recording. Okay, I'm just going to record this to the click, and I'm not going to bother having the other parts playing. So I'm just going to hit record now, and we should start recording. Remember this time, as we've chosen 2-bar count in, we're going to have 8 clicks before we start recording. Okay, let's have a look at our MIDI. Now, for some reason, it's really zoomed out, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit by using the magnifying icon. Now, while I show you quantization, I'm going to change my grid setting. So I'm going to right-click and go down to Fix Grid, and I'm going to choose 8th note. So these are the closest notes to what I played. As you can see here, I didn't actually get it bang on any of these notes other than this one. So let's just listen to that back. It's not terribly out of time, but it's not bang on. So what we're going to do now is quantize these notes. Quantizing is a quick way of correcting mistakes in timing when recording. So to actually quantize these notes, I'm going to select them all by pressing Command A on Mac or Control A on Windows, right-click on one of the notes, and select Quantize. We can see there, the notes have now snapped into position. This has worked very well due to the settings that I already have set up. I'll show you these now. Firstly, I'll press undo so these notes are no longer quantized. Okay, let's right-click on this note again and go to Quantize Settings. Here we can change our settings to make them more appropriate depending on the part that has been played. So if we go to Quantize 2, we'll see it says Current Grid. I'll go over that in a moment. Beneath this, we've got a number of different quantize options. So if I was to choose one 30-second note, for example, these notes are going to be quantized to the closest 30-second note. So if I press OK once more, it's worked for most of the notes, but this note here hasn't been snapped to the position that I wanted it. Let's press undo once again. I'll right-click on the note and go to Quantize Settings, or use the shortcut Command-Shift-and-U, or Control-Shift-U on Windows. Now, if I choose a different value, for example, quarter notes, then press OK, we'll see here our notes have jumped quite a long way. This is because they're no longer snapping to the 8th note that they were meant to be at. So for this melody, that's just not appropriate. I've just pressed undo once again. Let's go back to our quantize settings and look at something else. I'm going to select 8th note once again, as I know I want these to snap to the nearest 8th notes. So if I press OK, see there they've snapped to these positions. Now I'm going to use the shortcut this time, Command-Shift-and-U or Control-Shift-and-U. Now if I select End, let's see what happens. You'll see there the ends of the notes have been cut or stretched to the nearest 8th note. Each of these notes is now a multiple of an 8th note. So this is 2 8th notes exactly, so is this one's 3 and this one's 3. So this is really handy if you want your notes to be an exact length. I'm just going to press undo and show you the last setting. Then I'll press Command-Shift-and-U to open up my quantize settings, or Control-Shift-U on Windows again. Now we've got the amount. So at 100%, it's going to snap exactly to the point that you've set with the quantize 2 amount. If I reduce this, however, it won't quantize the notes as aggressively. You can see these 3 notes here haven't actually snapped all the way to the beat. This can be useful if you want your quantizing to be a bit less aggressive and sound more natural. But for this part, I want it to be exact. So I'm going to set this to 100%. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is the current grid setting. If you remember, just before we started quantizing, we changed the setting to fixed grid 1/8 notes. If I change this to 1 bar now, for example, and then I quantize these notes, just double check we've got current grid selected, then I'll press OK. Now each of our notes has been snapped to the nearest bar, and they're all exactly 1 bar in length. If I press undo and change grid setting to 1/8 notes once again, then we quantize them. They're now snapped to the 1/8 notes. So this current grid setting is really useful. So I'll generally leave my quantized settings on current grid. This means whenever I change my grid setting, I can have a look, see what's going to be most appropriate for my part, and then I simply hit quantize and it will snap to this point. Now, rather than opening up my quantized settings every time I want to correct the timing of a part, all I have to do is change a grid setting, see what looks like is going to be most appropriate for the part, and then I can simply hit Command and U or Control U on Windows, and that will quickly quantize it. So just to clarify, these quantized settings will now be stored, so next time you want to quantize something with the same settings, you can simply press Command U or Control U, and these settings will be applied. So as I say, I generally leave the quantize setting on current grid, then I can simply select all the notes that I want to quantize, and then use the shortcut Command U to quickly quantize these to that grid setting. Great, let's have a listen back with the click and compare the quantized and unquantized notes. So that was quantized, and this is unquantized. It all just sounds a bit tidier once the part is quantized. I'll just press Shift Command and Z to redo so the notes are quantized once again. Right, I'm just going to listen back to this part with the rest of the song. Firstly, I'll turn off my metronome as I don't need it anymore. I just want to quickly draw in one more note here. And also, if you look at the velocity, this note here is way lower than the rest, so I'm going to increase this quite a bit. Okay, so this song now has some decent harmonic ideas, as in we've got a bass part, some chords, an arpeggio and a melody. The next thing we need to do is add a drum part, and then we can start structuring our song. One thing which I should do now, which I should have done before, is save this project. It's really important to just keep saving your project in case your computer crashes and you lose all your work. So I'm just going to go up to File, Save Live Set As, and I'm going to name it Trap Song. I'm just going to save this on my desktop. Then press Save. Right, now our project is saved, so if it crashes, we're not going to lose anything. So the next thing I want to do for the song is create a drum part. Honestly, I'd usually do this earlier on, maybe even before I created the bass part, but I just wanted to show you the basics of MIDI before I went into a little more detail writing drums. Again, some people prefer recording drums in so they can get a good feel for the track, but I've noticed a lot of beginners do find it easier to program the drums in first. Right, so I'm going to create a new track. I'm just going to right-click on this grey space here and select Insert MIDI Track. Now I'm going to go over to my browser, go to Packs, Core Library, Racks, Drum Racks, and down under Drum Machines, I'm going to choose 808 Core Kit. This drum kit should be available in most editions of Ableton Live. You don't have to use the same one, but I just quite like the sound of the 808 kit. There are a number of different drum kits you can use, which just have different sounds, so feel free to use these if you wish. Right, so I'm just going to drag this over onto my MIDI track. Okay, next I'm going to create a new MIDI clip. So I'm going to go up to my drum kit, double click, and it's created a new clip. I'm just going to make the MIDI note editor a little bigger for the moment, so I'm going to hover my mouse over here and click and drag upwards. Now we've just got a better view. So you'll notice how the MIDI note editor looks very similar when programming in drums, as it would to a harmonic part. The main difference, however, is we have the different drum sounds listed on the keyboard on the left here. So this makes it really easy to know where to program your notes. So if I want a bass drum, I know to go down here and draw a note down here. You can audition the sounds by clicking on the keys. But again, make sure this headphone icon is illuminated blue, otherwise you won't be able to hear the preview. So when I'm programming drums, I'd usually start off with a kick drum, then add the snare, then the hi-hats, and then other percussion afterwards. So just like writing in other MIDI parts, you double-click to draw in a MIDI note. But there's another way to draw in notes which can be very useful when writing drums, and that is using the draw tool. So to access the draw tool, just simply use the keyboard shortcut B. So that's the letter B on your QWERTY keyboard. Alternatively, you go to this icon up here, which will turn the draw tool on and off. Again, when it's orange, it's active. So you'll see, instead of a normal cursor, we've got this pencil. So all you have to do to draw in a note with this tool is click once. Again, you can edit the start and end points of your note. But you'll notice if you click on the middle, it'll actually delete your note rather than allowing you to move it. So there are pros and cons of using this tool, and it just depends which you prefer. And it's all down to personal preference, whichever you find easier to use. Something that is really useful about the draw tool, however, is you can click and drag to draw multiple notes in. So if I click and drag on this hi-hat part here, you'll see there I've drawn in a note for every increment of the grid. And again, to delete, you can click and drag. This can be particularly useful for hi-hats, as you can draw in a hi-hat part really quickly. I'm just going to stop all of my clips and play this clip back on its own. See there, we've already got a hi-hat part drawn in. Right, let's delete all of those quickly. Now, I'm just going to change the grid setting, so I'm going to right-click and choose a different grid setting. This time, I'll choose quarter notes. Now if I click and drag, you'll notice we have a kick drum on each beat of this bar. So depending on what grid setting you have, will determine the length of the note that the draw tool writes in. I'm just going to draw a snare drum in on beats 2 and 4. I'm going to change my grid to 8th notes and draw in some hi-hats. So as you can see, the draw tool in combination with changing the grid settings is a very quick way to draw in ideas. Something else I'll mention now though. If you go back to the normal cursor, you'll notice we can click and drag over multiple MIDI notes to make a selection. When using the draw tool, however, you'll not be able to do this, as when you click, it will simply draw in a note. So just bear this in mind when working with the draw tool. Right, I'm just going to delete everything in this clip, as I want to create a new drum beat from scratch. I've now gone away and created a new drum beat. If you'd like, you can pause this video and copy this from my screen. The grid is set to 8th notes. Alternatively, you can just create your own drum beat. If you want to see me going through and creating this drum beat while using some more features, such as record quantization and MIDI overdub recording, then be sure to check out the full course, which you can access via the link in the description of this video. We've been looking at MIDI in a lot of detail in the past few videos, but I just want to show you a couple more handy features before we move on to turning our ideas into a song. So we're getting close now. We have a 2-bar drum loop, but really I want it to be a 4-bar loop so I can add a bit more variation. So I could extend the end of the loop, just drag it out, then select all of my notes and copy them over, but there's a quicker way of doing this. All you've got to do is go over to the left-hand side of your clip here and click on Duplicate. What this is going to do is duplicate the clip so it's twice the length. Right, so now we've got a 4-bar loop. The first 2 bars are exactly the same as the second 2 bars. I'm just going to make a little change to the hi-hats now, just so we've got that extra variation. So I'm just going to delete these last 5 notes. So I'm going to select those ones and press backspace. Now I want to draw in some 16th notes here. So I'm going to change my grid so it's on 16th note once again. I'm just going to double click to draw in a couple of notes. I'm just going to bring down the velocity of this second one very slightly. So I'm going to hold Command on a Mac or Alt on Windows and then click and drag. Now I'm just going to select these 2 notes, hold Option on a Mac or Control on Windows and copy them over. Right, and for the last 2 notes, I just want 2 more 8th notes. So I'm going to copy these 2 notes over to there. So again, I'm going to hold Option or Control on Windows and drag. Let's hear that back. I just added the symbol in there because I wanted it every 4 bars. Now, something else I want to do is match the kick pattern to our bass part. So in this style of music, it's often common to have the kick and bass part playing the same rhythm in certain sections of the song. So what I'm going to do is select my kick drum notes. So I'll click on the note on the left-hand side and it'll select all of them. Then I'm going to press Command-C on a Mac or Control-C on Windows to copy them all. Right, now I'm going to open up my bass clip. Here we can see our different bass notes. Now I'm just going to press Command-V or Control-V on Windows to paste the kick drum pattern into this bass clip. One thing you'll notice is it's actually pasted from bar 7. So you may have realised I had a selection made over here. So I'm just going to press Undo. Now I'm going to click at the very start of this bar. Now we know our notes are going to be pasted at this point. You may just be able to see that white bar. See this one here? You can just see that it's right at the start. So let's paste those in once more. So Command-V. Now what I'm going to do is drag our kick pattern up to the note of F1, because that's where our bass note should be. So I'm going to select all of these notes and click and drag upwards. Great, now they've overwritten the note that was there, and we've got this pattern on the bass. I'll do the same for the next 3 notes. This time I'm going to hold Option on a Mac or Control on Windows and drag them over to the A. And finally up to the C. Right, now our kick and bass should be the same rhythm. Let's listen to it back. So one thing you may notice is the bass part sounds pretty weird now because the notes aren't being held. So I just need to go in and extend the length of each of these notes. So I could do this manually and click and drag individual notes. But this will take quite a while. So there's another feature that we can use, and that is legato. So what legato will do is extend each note to the following note. So I'm just going to press Command-A to select all of my notes. Then I'm going to hit this button over here which says legato. See there, all of the notes have now filled out the gaps up until the next note. Let's listen to it back once more. Sounds much better. One other thing I just want to clarify, I'll just press Undo. If I select individual notes, such as these, I can use legato and it will just do it to those notes. But if I actually don't have any notes selected in the clip, and then press legato, it'll apply this function to all of the notes. Alright, great, we've now got a drum beat and it's matching our bass part nicely, so we've got a good backbone for the track. Right, so as you can see, we've only got 5 tracks so far, but we'll be adding some more quite soon. It's probably time that we start organising our session. Otherwise, it can become a bit overwhelming in the future. So, I'm just going to start renaming my tracks and my clips. To rename a track, simply right-click. Then you can go down to rename. I'm just going to call this bass. Now I'm going to change the name of this track. First of all, I'm just going to solo it with this button down here to make sure I know which part it is, and play back. So that's my arpeggio part. So I'm going to right-click and rename this arpeggio. Going to do the same for this track, so I'll solo this and play again. That's this melody part. Another way to rename is simply using the shortcut Command-R or Control-R on Windows. Then you can simply type it in. You just have to make sure the correct track is selected. Something else I'm going to do is change the colour of this track, because it's the same as my arpeggio part. This will just make things easier to see. So you can right-click and then go down to one of these colours. Just click on one of these and that'll change the colour of your track. You can also do the same on the clips. So I'm going to right-click and choose a different colour. I'm going to rename my last 2 tracks. Right, I'm now going to give names to my different clips. Just help me remember what these parts are. I feel like the idea that I've come up with feels like a chorus. So I'm just going to rename this clip Chorus Bass. You rename clips in the exact same way as renaming tracks. I'm going to rename this, call this arpeggio. I'll just call it ARP for short. Now our session is a little bit more organised, so let's start looking at how you can use clips to arrange your song ideas. So clips can be moved to different clip slots on the same tracks, or even moved to different tracks. So if I clicked and dragged this pad clip, I could drag it over to my arpeggio track. Again, you can drop it in any clip slot that's available. Be careful if you drag over another clip slot, as you will delete the clip that's already there. So I'm just going to press undo. Moving clips around can be a good way to try out different ideas on different sounds. So clips can also be duplicated. Sometimes you may want to use a very similar part in 2 sections of your song, so that's when duplicating is useful. To do so, right-click and go to Duplicate, or use the shortcut Command-D on a Mac or Control-D on Windows. See, now we have 2 of the exact same clips on this arpeggio track. Another way to duplicate is holding Option on a Mac or Control on Windows and clicking and dragging to a new clip slot. See there, the little plus icon has appeared. I'll just press undo. I'm going to start coming up with a bit of an arrangement. So I've already duplicated my arpeggio, and now I'm going to duplicate this melody. Right, so the idea I've got is to play these 2 parts before I play the whole chorus section. I'm just going to order this slightly differently, so I've got my intro section at the top and my chorus section just below. So I'm just going to move all of these other clips down to the second scene. I could play this first scene back with just these 2 clips, and then play the second scene back, which has the rest. I'll just hit stop quickly first to disengage all of our clips, and then play my first scene. Okay, our set is a little better organised now. The next thing I need to talk about is a quantization menu, as this will determine how your clips are played back. So, the quantization menu is this box over here. As you can see, it's set to 1 bar at the moment. This is the default setting. Whenever I play a clip or a scene, it'll be triggered on the downbeat of the next bar. So, if I play this first scene, and then the second one, you'll notice it'll start playing at the start of the next bar. Again, if I stop all of these and show you another example, I can start playing my bass back. See there, I pressed play on the drums partway through a bar and they started playing at the next bar. Again, if I were to press the stop button during playback, it'll wait till the start of the next bar to stop all the clips. See, it was flashing there for a moment. Now, if I go up to my global quantization menu and choose none, let's see what happens. The clips will start and stop exactly when you press the start and stop buttons. They're not going to wait until the next bar. So if we were trying to build up an arrangement, such as bring in the drums first, then the bass, the pad and the melody, it'd be extremely difficult to get the loops going together in time with each other. See, that was all out of time. If I was to change the global quantization menu to a different number, let's try 4 bars. I'll just stop all the clips once more and start playing these back individually. See, whenever I triggered a new clip, it waited until the start of the next 4-bar loop. So this makes it a lot easier to add new clips in and keep them in time with each other. Again, if I press play on this now and then hit the stop button, our arrangement won't stop until the end of the 4-bar loop. You can see the stop button was flashing, displaying that it had been pressed and that it was going to stop at the start of the next 4-bar loop. Generally, I'd recommend setting the global quantization to 2 or 4 bars, as this gives you a little bit more time to press your clips so they start playing back at the correct point. You can shorten it to 1 bar if you want, as this way you can bring clips in at different times. However, as I say, if you're a beginner, it can be easier to do everything in 4-bar loops. There are a number of different options here, so you can have half bar, a quarter of a bar, an eighth of a bar, etc. But it's going to get a lot more difficult. I'd recommend using one of the longer settings until you're a more advanced user. I'm just going to leave it on 4 bars for the moment. Something else I want to mention quickly is clip lengths. So you'll notice all of our clips loop continuously. But if you remember, some of these clips are different lengths. So if we look at the melody part, this is only 2 bars in length, whereas the drums are 4 bars and the bass is 8 bars. I'm just going to play these back quickly. I've now paused playback. Have a look at the track status display where you can see these little pie charts. I'll play it back again and have a look at the melody. The pie chart is going round way quicker than the pad or bass part. Notice how the melody pie chart has completed 2 rotations, in the time the chorus bass part has completed half a rotation. So we can see the amount of rotations with this figure on the left. The figure on the right dictates the length of the clip in beats. So this melody part is 8 beats, and this one is 32 beats. There's 8 beats in 2 bars, and there's 32 beats in 8 bars. I just wanted to go over that quickly, as it can be really useful to see how far through the rotation your clips are. I've just gone away and added a few more parts to this song. I've added a verse section, which consists of bass, drums, and a guitar part. And I've also changed the intro section so it has some more variation from the chorus. If you'd like to see all of these stages in more detail, be sure to check out the full course, where I take you through step by step building up this song. Again, you can find the full course from the link in the description below this video. I'm now going to go over the steps involved when setting up for an audio recording. So, if you have an audio interface and an XLR microphone, you can set these up to record in Ableton Live. You can also use a USB microphone or even the built-in microphone on a computer. However, I would not recommend using this last option as the audio quality will be poor. So, just to get you going quickly, I'm going to skim over how to get set up. So what we need to do is go into our preferences. So on Windows, go to Options, Preferences, or on a Mac, go to Live and select Preferences. Now navigate to the Audio tab. That's this second tab down here. If you currently do not have an audio device selected, you'll only see these options at the top, under Audio Device. The rest of them may not be here. Now, what we need to do is choose our audio input device. So this is going to be the input for Ableton Live. So if you're using an audio interface and an XLR microphone, in here you need to choose your audio interface as the input. So for example, I could choose Audient ID22. This is my interface. If your interface isn't appearing in this list, go to the Audio Interface's official website and download any appropriate drivers. Now, if you're using a USB microphone, it'll also appear in this audio input device list. At the moment, I have a USB microphone plugged in, and that's this here, Blue Snowball. Again, if this isn't showing up, you'll need to download the relevant driver from the manufacturer's website. If you want, you can use your computer's built-in microphone. If your computer has one, it should appear in this list. If you're using an audio interface and you have studio monitors or headphones plugged into the interface, you can choose your audio output device here. You can just have your headphones plugged straight into your computer, but if you're using an audio interface, you may as well select that as the audio output device in this list. Right now, I need to leave it on Telestream Audio Capture, as this is recording the audio for this tutorial. Normally, I'd choose my audio interface, which is the ID22. Again, if you're using a USB mic or your built-in microphone on your computer, choose built-in output on Mac. Or, if you're using Windows, choose your appropriate output. This could be an ASIO device, your built-in speakers, or a Windows audio device. If it was already working fine, don't bother changing this. Okay, so your audio interface or USB microphone should now be set up. I'm just going to add my input as the ID22. Okay, so that's the bare essentials to set up your microphone so you can record with an Ableton Live. Now we have our microphone set up, we're almost ready to record. So let's just get our session set up. Firstly, add a new audio track. So I'm just going to right click in this blank space here and select Insert Audio Track. Now I'm just going to set up the input. If you're using an external interface, plug your microphone into input 1 and turn the gain dial up about halfway. If you're using condenser microphone, make sure phantom power is turned on your interface. There's usually a button with a plus 48V icon near the input gain dial. That's the phantom power. If you want to record a guitar or an external instrument, such as a synthesizer, plug this in instead. Again, if you're using a USB mic, make sure the gain dial is turned up. Or, if you're using the built-in mic on your computer, go into your sound settings and make sure the mic's input volume is turned up. Now, I'd recommend using headphones rather than speakers to avoid getting any feedback. So, what you need to do next is record enable your track. You may notice here I'm getting some movement when I speak. That's because my microphone is plugged into input 1. I'm actually going to use a synthesizer for this recording rather than a microphone, just so it's easier to distinguish between my voice. So if you're using input 2 or another input in your audio interface, just choose it from this drop-down box here. Now when I play a note on my external instrument, you'll see that's lighting up. Okay, so now we've got our input set up, let's just hit the record arm button down here. Notice my monitor is set to off at the moment, but I'm just going to play back a note quickly, and we can see there, those grey bars are indicating this track is receiving signal. Now what you need to do is set the input signal for your microphone. So at the moment, when I play a note, you can see this meter is reaching around -12, and that's actually quite a good starting point. If I turn it up too much, you'll see there it's reaching the top, it's going red, and it's clipping. When clipping occurs, the audio signal will distort and damage the quality of your audio. So if at any point your signal is clipping, you need to turn down your microphone's input. Right now I'm just playing a note on my synthesizer and turning down the gain on my audio interface. There, the loudest point of the signal was around -6. I'm just going to turn it down a tiny bit more, as sometimes when you're performing, your signal may increase slightly. So I'm just playing a note again and turning it down a tiny bit more. Right, this should be fine. Now I'm just going to turn monitor to auto, and we should be able to hear what I'm playing in. So the sound you're hearing there is the sound of a synthesizer being plugged into my audio interface. It is set up in exactly the same way as using a microphone. I've gone into one of the inputs on my interface and adjusted the input gain just as I would if I was using a microphone. If I swap this over to input number 1, you'll now be able to see signal whenever I'm speaking. I'm just going to put that back to input 2 as I don't want to record my voice at the moment. Now, if you're recording your voice with a microphone or even another instrument and you don't want to hear it back in your headphones, then just turn monitor to off. It will still record, but you won't actually hear it being played back in your headphones. This is down to personal preference. Some people like recording being able to hear what's going into the computer, whereas other people do not. Something else I'll mention quickly now. If you've got monitor on auto and you can hear your voice being played back in your headphones, if there's a slight delay, you may need to reduce the buffer size on your computer. So to access that, we need to go back to our audio settings once again. So on Windows, go to Options, Preferences, or on Mac, go to Live Preferences. Now go to the Audio tab, and you should be able to see this buffer size. So the shorter the buffer size, the less latency you'll have when recording. So if I have a shorter buffer size, there'll be less of a delay between my source going into the microphone and us actually hearing it back through Ableton. One problem with doing this, if you reduce the buffer size too much, it could cause your computer to crash or glitch. So just try out different settings. The lower you go, the less latency you'll get. The higher you are, the less strain your computer will be put under. However, there will be more latency. I'm just going to leave mine at 128 for the moment. Generally, when recording, I'd recommend having the buffer size as low as your computer can handle, but when you're mixing, you may as well increase the buffer size to its max, as it will allow you to use more plugins. Right, what I'm going to do now is record in a bass part. So, I'm going to make sure my track is record enabled. I'm just going to turn monitor to auto mode now so you can hear it back while recording. I want to record this part along with the other clips in the track. I'm just going to make sure they're active by pressing the scene button here, and then pausing. Now, when I hit record, these will play along with the recording. I'm just going to check what my counting is quickly. Right, we've got 1 bar. And I don't really need a metronome anymore, as I've got my drum part. Right, let's record. Okay, I recorded in a simple bass part, just doubling the bass that we've already got. Let's have a listen back to it. Okay, that sounds fine, but the timing is a little off. In the next video, I'll look at quantizing this piece of audio. Something I want to do quickly first though, is just double check the length of my loop is correct. Here, I want it to be 16 bars in length. So let's just double check that's exactly 16, so it's the same as our original bass part. Right, as you can see, once you're all set up, recording audio is just as easy as recording MIDI. Editing audio is a little more difficult, but we'll start looking at that next. I'm not going to go over audio editing in a lot of detail at the moment, as there is a lot you can do. For now, I just want to show you the basics. Right, just to show you some extreme examples of audio editing, I'm going to record in a different bit of audio. So I'm just going to record in some clicks and claps. I'm going to stop all my clips and just record this into a new clip on my audio track. I want to use my microphone for this recording, so I'm going to change my input to the input that my microphone is plugged into on my interface, which is input 1. One thing I didn't mention in the previous video, if you can see input 1/2, that's a stereo input, so you can use both inputs 1 and 2 at the same time. Don't worry about this for the moment, as if you've only got one microphone, you'll be recording in mono. Recording in mono requires you to use one input, for example, input 1. If you record in stereo with one microphone, you'll only hear the audio signal coming out of one side, so you'll hear it either in the left or the right, depending on which input your microphone is plugged into. Right, so I'm just going to turn my metronome on, change this to input 1, and then start recording. As you can see there, it was clipping quite a lot, so I'm just going to try once again. So I'll just press undo to get rid of that recording. Okay, so I just recorded in some claps there. Let's listen to those back. Right, you'll notice they're not quite in time with the click. Now, sometimes when you're recording into a clip, you might want to try out a few different ideas. And that's what I did here. I was just changing the rhythm of the clap. I've decided I don't want anything up to this point here, so I can change the length of my clip. So it's starting at bar 6 now, and it's only 3 bars in length. Let's zoom in a little bit. Right, so this is the part that I want to work on. Let's hear that back. Okay, it's very out of time with the click. Now, something I want to show you quickly. See, at the moment, our clip is starting at bar 6. But what you can do is actually change where beat 1 of bar 1 is within your clip. So just zoom in to around where you want beat 1. So I'm going to right click and go up to set 1.1.1 here. Now we can see this is beat 1 of bar 1. Anything before are minus numbers. I'm just going to drag this so my clip starts at the same point. So now I can have a 2-bar clip starting at bar 1. In this situation, it wasn't vital, but it can become quite confusing if you're starting your clip at a strange point. Now, something else you can do is delete any audio before your clip starts. All you have to do is right-click in the sample editor and select Crop Sample. Now it's cut out the other audio and just left us with this shorter clip. Let's drag this back so it's 2 bars in length as well. So now it's ending at the start of bar 3. Right, so that's how you can start tidying up your recording. Let's listen back to it now. So, like MIDI, we can quantize audio. Just be aware, it's not quite as flexible as quantizing MIDI. I'm just going to open up this bass part that we recorded recently. And now I'm going to use the quick quantize option to quantize my audio. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit. Here we can see our grid is on an adaptive setting. I'm just going to change this to quarter note. This way, when we quantize it, we'll have a better chance of each of these notes starting on the bar. Right, now I'm just going to press Quick Quantize shortcut, which is Command-U on a Mac or Control-U on Windows. We can see there these notes have all been moved into time. Something else you'll notice is these little orange markers have appeared. These are what we call warp markers. These are basically points that Ableton has assigned where it has noticed there is a transient. A transient is a spike in audio, so the transients here are the start of each of our notes. We can actually click and drag these and move them around if we like. So we could even change the rhythm of this part. Let's listen back to it. See, those notes are all starting on beat 1 of each bar. I'll just press undo so we can listen to it unquantized. And I'll press redo now. So, in this situation, it's done a really good job. Right, let's look at the other piece of audio we recorded. Now, I'm just going to press Command U once again to quick quantize. Now we'll listen back. So the last 3 notes have been quantized perfectly in time, but this first one hasn't. That's because you may notice this warp marker isn't actually in time with this transient. I'll zoom in a bit more so you can see. See there, the warp marker is at the very start of this clip and isn't actually on this note. So what we can do is actually draw in transient markers. There's a couple of ways of doing so. I can right-click on this little grey area here and select Insert Warp Marker. Now it's added a new warp marker. We can delete them by right-clicking and going up to Delete. So now a warp marker is gone. Alternatively, you can double-click up here and it'll add a new warp marker. One thing to note, since I've added that new warp marker, I'll still need to quantize it. And also, when adding warp markers, I'd always recommend zooming right in to make sure the warp marker starts at the point where the audio crosses this line in the middle. So that is about there. I could even delete that one and move it over very slightly. I might draw it in here, so I'm just going to double click. If you double click, it'll just draw in one warp marker, whereas if you right click, it'll add more warp markers wherever it thinks it needs them. Okay, I'm just going to try quantizing again. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command U. That one has been quantized correctly, but you'll notice this one still hasn't. So I'm just going to select this warp marker. I'm actually going to click and drag it to the position I would like. See there, it's snapped back to the start of the bar. Let's listen back once more. That's perfectly in time with our grid. Now, a couple more things I want to mention quickly. If you're unable to draw in warp markers, you just need to make sure that this icon here, which says warp, is active. See, when I take that off, all of our warp markers have gone, and this clip will now be out of time. So make sure this is enabled. Something else you need to do if you have to click on the warp icon is make sure you re-engage loop. Because right now, this clip is no longer going to be looping. So the clip will only play through once. Sometimes you may want to do this, but right now I don't want to, so I'm just going to select loop. Now when I play it back again. Now another thing I'll mention very briefly is warp mode. So Ableton will do its best to try and quantize your audio in the most subtle way possible, but there are a couple of different settings you can try depending on the type of audio. Now, when working on percussive parts, you want to have warp mode set to beats. This is the most appropriate setting for when working with percussive sounds. However, if I was quantizing something harmonic, for example this bass part, if it starts to sound a bit strange, you may want to try using a different setting. For example, tones. Now, I'll just open up the quick help for a moment. If you're ever unsure of what type to use, just hover your mouse over this box and it will give you a brief description of the different warp modes. It's not always essential to do this, but if you've noticed your audio starts to have some strange artifacts, try out a couple of these different types. I'd recommend looking at beats, tones and texture first. Something else I mention is you can actually warp any audio file. So if you've chosen a sample from the browser, you can use these warp modes to actually quantize it so it matches with your project. You can even move notes around to change a rhythm. Right, so that's the very basics of audio editing, and that should be enough to get you started. Okay, I've just gone away and added a number of new parts using the skills and techniques I've already shown you. If you'd like to see me going through and adding in all these new parts, then make sure to check out the full course, where you can also download this Ableton Live set. Okay, so now we've got our ideas, we need to finally turn them into a song. So, we need to do this using the arrangement view. That is this view over here. You can access it by clicking on this button, or by pressing Tab on your keyboard. Some people prefer to just use the arrangement view to write music. This is how many other digital audio workstations are used. However, using clips is a great way of writing music and a big part of Ableton Live. So generally, I'd recommend coming up with your ideas in the session view, then putting them into the arrangement view. So just like in the session view, where you can record or edit MIDI and audio, we just go about it in a slightly different way. So the way I'd recommend you get your clips into the arrangement view is by recording them in. This can save you time and allows you to perform your clips in the order that you'd like them to be in your song structure. So I'll quickly show you how you can record into the arrangement view. First of all, have a look at your Global Launch Quantization menu. I'd recommend choosing 1, 2, 4 or 8 bars. I'm going to leave it at 4 bars for the moment, as this can make it easier to play back your clips at the right time. Now, make sure none of your tracks are record enabled. So if any of your tracks have the record arm button lit up, just click on it so it's disengaged. Now the last thing we need to do is hit record. So if I hit record now, it'll start recording straight away. If you have a count in, it'll go through at count in first. But the way I'd recommend you recording is holding Shift and then clicking on this button. So what will happen now is Ableton Live will wait until you play your first clip or scene back, and your recording will commence. This means you'll always be able to start your recording in time with the timeline. One thing to note, you don't have to play back your clips or scenes in any particular order. Experiment playing different clips back at different times to come up with an interesting arrangement. Right, I'm going to record some of my clips into the arrangement now. Everything is set up, so all I have to do now is play a clip or a scene. Okay, once you've stopped all your clips, stop recording by pressing the stop button at the top or the space bar. Now let's have a look at our arrangement view. As you can see here, our clips have been recorded into the arrangement view in the order that we played them back. Now, one thing to note, if I try and play this back now, we're not actually going to hear anything. That's because we need to press the Back to Arrangement View button. So we can see the timeline cursor moving along the timeline. However, we're not hearing anything. Once you press this button, you should be able to play this arrangement back and it won't be grayed out anymore. Let's have a listen. Okay, great, we can hear our arrangement. So, as you've probably guessed, the timeline is this at the top here. We can see the bar numbers running along the top. And at the bottom down here, we can see the time. We can zoom just like in the MIDI note editor by hovering over the top to get the magnifying glass icon. Then you can click and drag. You can also zoom using keyboard shortcuts plus and minus. The tracks are listed down on the side here, so they're just the same as in the session view, but flipped sideways. Now, something to mention. If we go back to the session view and play some of our clips back, when we go to the arrangement view again, you'll notice that the tracks that were played back have been grayed out. So when I try and play my arrangement, you'll notice it's just playing back the clips that were activated in the session view. So again, you'll need to press the Back to Arrangement View button. You can also access this button down here on the master channel. See how it's lit up orange at the moment? Once I press it, it goes grey, and now we'll be able to play back our arrangement. To play back the arrangement from the start, press the stop button at the top here. If you want to select another place to play back the arrangement from, simply click somewhere on the timeline. Now when I press play, it'll start playback from this point. Again, you can play and pause by using the spacebar. Okay, so that's my favourite way of getting my ideas from the session view into the arrangement view. There are a couple more ways that you can do so, which I'll show you shortly. The next way I want to show you is by simply dragging and dropping clips in. So what you can do is simply click and drag a clip from the session view over into the arrangement view. So just click a clip, drag it over, and hover it over the arrangement view icon. You can now drop that clip into the arrangement. You can actually drop it onto any track, so make sure you choose the right track. Another very similar way of doing so is by clicking and holding on a clip and pressing the tab button. So this just jumps over to the arrangement view. Now when I move my mouse, I can select where I'd like to drop the clip. You can also do this with multiple clips. So to select multiple clips, click and hold Control on Windows or Command on Mac and select any clips you'd like to copy over. Then you can either drag them over to the icon and drop them in, or you can do the same by clicking and holding and pressing Tab. Just going to select all of these and move them down to the correct tracks. Another quick way to move clips into the arrangement view is by click on the one that you'd like to move over and press Copy. So that's Command C on Mac or Control C on Windows. Then go to the arrangement, select where you'd like to paste it just by clicking on the timeline, and press Paste. So Command V on Mac or Control V on Windows. You can see here the clip has been copied over. Another really handy feature is using the scenes to copy clips over. So if I click and drag a scene over to the arrangement view, when doing so, scroll up to the top instrument so you make sure you copy all the clips that are in the scene and then drop it in. See now it's copied everything that was in that scene into the arrangement view. I'm just going to delete all these ones that I've just copied over as I've already got an arrangement here on the left. So that's how to get your ideas into the arrangement view. Now what we need to do is start working on our song structure in the arrangement. There's loads of stuff I need to teach you about editing in the arrangement view, which I'll look at now. So we've previously looked at the very basics, playing, pausing, and navigating around the timeline. So just a quick reminder, you can play and pause with the spacebar or the buttons at the top here, and to choose where you want to play back your song from, click somewhere on the arrangement and press space, or hover over the timeline so this icon appears. Then when you click, playback will start from this point. Now, something else I want to show you is a loop feature. This is really handy if you want to listen back to a part of your song to make edits, for example. So, to select an area of your track to create a loop, just make a selection. For example, I can make a selection by clicking on one of my clips. Then, all I need to do is press Command and L on a Mac or Control L on Windows. Now, this section will loop over and over. To turn the loop off again, simply press Command L or Control L once again. You'll notice how this loop area is greyed out. So I'll just make a small selection. This time I'm just going to click and drag on a blank space of the timeline. So now this section here has been selected. I'll press Command and L, and it's now jumped to this point. If I play the track back now, it'll loop this section over and over. But if I press Command L once again, it will no longer loop. Something else you might want to do is just loop your whole track. If you want to loop the whole length of your track, simply click and drag from the start to the end, or vice versa. Then once again, Command L or Control L, and now your whole song will be looped over and over. Okay, next I'm going to look at moving clips around. So right now I'm not really going to structure this song, I'll do that in a later video. I just want to show you a number of the different features. So to move clips, just hover your mouse over the top section of a clip. Then when this hand icon appears, you can click and drag the clip. See here, I can click and drag it over to the right or move it back to the left. You can also drag clips onto other tracks. So if I wanted to hear this part on the bass track, for example, I'll just drag it up to the bass track. Now if I solo this track and play back this part, so I'm going to select this clip, then press Command L or Control L, so it'll loop this section. So that's the arpeggio part on our bass track. I'll just move it back down to where it was. Something else I'll mention quickly, if you want to duplicate a track, you can do so by dragging a clip down to this area at the bottom which says Drop Files and Devices here. So if I was to click and drag this lead guitar part down to that area, it'll just duplicate the lead guitar track. Now we have all the exact same settings, so we've got the same instrument, and if you had any plugins, these would also be loaded on this track. So this could be handy if you want a duplicate of the same track. I'm just going to press undo to get rid of this. Right, so back to moving clips around. If I click and drag on clips, as you can see, they'll move forwards or backwards in time. You'll notice here they're actually jumping and conforming with the grid increments. So another way to quickly move them is using the left and right arrow keys. Again, the clip will jump back and forth on these grid increments. If you want, you can move the clip in fine increments by holding Command on a Mac or Alt on Windows, and then using the arrow keys. See there, it's moving back and forth very slightly. Again, if you were to move a clip with a mouse, if you hold Command on Mac or Alt on Windows, it'll do the same and you'll be able to move the clip in much finer increments. Generally, I wouldn't really need to do it in the small increments as I want my clip to be snapped in time with the grid. Just going to press undo a few times. Just going to zoom in a touch, again by using the plus key on the keyboard. As you can see, when I'm zooming in, my grid amount is changing. That's because we're on an adaptive grid setting. So if you wanted to jump clips back and forth in small increments, you can zoom in, and then when you use the arrow keys, it's going to jump in these finer increments. If you wanted to do this a slightly quicker way, you could actually change the grid setting. So here I could click on one of the fixed grid or adaptive grid modes. Let's just choose fixed grid for the moment, and here we're on 8th notes. So as I zoom out, we can still see those 8th note increments. A handy shortcut that allows you to change the grid increments quickly is by holding Command on Mac or Control on Windows, and then pressing 1 or 2. Right now I'm holding Command and pressing 2, and we can see there the grid increments are getting larger. So now we're on half notes. If I was to hold Command and then press 1, or Control and 1. And we've got much finer increments on the grid. I'm just going to go back to the adaptive grid and choose narrow. So I've shown you how to move individual clips, but if you want to move multiple clips at the same time, it's very easy to do so. Click on one of the clips that you'd like to move. Then hold Shift and select another clip that you'd like to move. Now a selection has been made and I can move all of these clips at the same time. Again, this works with mouse or the arrow keys on your keyboard. You could do this with clips on multiple tracks as well. This time, to make a selection, I'm going to click and drag over the clips that I'd like to select. Now when I move these, the clips on all 3 tracks will move. Okay, so that's the very basics. Now let's look at copying. So this works in a similar way to copying MIDI notes in the MIDI note editor. My preferred way of copying is by holding the Option key on the keyboard while dragging. So if I was to move this clip and hold the Option key at the same time, or Control on Windows, we'll see that plus icon appears. Again, just like copying MIDI notes, that has now been duplicated. I'll just press undo. You can also use the copy and paste feature using Command C or Control C. So I'll press Command C now, then click where I'd like to paste my clip, and press Command V. So that's Control V on Windows. Now this clip has been pasted at this point. So just remember, you need to select where on the timeline you'd like the clips to be pasted. This can also be on other tracks. So I've now selected this pad track, and when I paste, this clip is now on this track. An even quicker way of doing so is duplicating. So instead of copying and then pasting, you can simply press Command D or Control D. The clip will be duplicated at the end of the selection that had been made. One thing to note, be careful when making a selection, as if I highlight these clips here and then press duplicate, as the selection ended at this point here, when we duplicate them, that's where they'll be pasted. So if I wanted them to be pasted right at the end, make sure your selection ends at the point you'd like your clip to be pasted. So now if I press Command D, we've got it pasted directly after the clip. Again, you can do this with multiple clips, so I'm going to select all of these clips here, and then press duplicate. But notice my selection ends at this point, so this is where it'll be pasted from. So Command D or Control D, and there we are. They've been pasted from this point here. Let's just press undo and try that again. This time I'll make sure my selection ends at the correct point. Now when I press Command D, they've been pasted right at this point at the start of bar 73. I've just pressed undo again. Another handy editing feature I should talk about is making selections of clips. So, as I showed you before, if you hover your mouse over the top section of a clip, this hand icon will appear and you'll be able to move the clip. If you hover the mouse further down and click and drag, you'll see here you actually get a selection made on your clip. This can be useful if you want to duplicate just one section of a clip. So now, when I press Command D, we'll just duplicate this end section of the clip. If I keep pressing Command D, it's going to keep duplicating that same clip. Now it's been selected, if I click and drag it, you'll see there it's actually separated that portion of the clip. I could do this on this one here, so I've made my selection, then I'll hover my mouse over the top part and click and drag, and now it's separated into another clip. If you want to separate a clip without clicking and dragging, click to make a selection. This time I won't drag, I'll just click where I'd like to make the cut, then press Command and E on a Mac or Control E on Windows. See, that clip has now been cut into 2. Again, this works on MIDI tracks as well as audio. So that's Command E to split a clip. A great feature for joining clips together, if you've got a number of clips that you want to consolidate into one, is using the shortcut Command J. So I'm going to quickly cut up this chorus drums here into a number of different clips. So I'm going to press Command E, make a selection, Command E, another selection, Command E, and so on. So now here we've actually got a number of different clips. We can tell the different clips as the name has been repeated at the start of each clip. You can also see the black line showing they've been cut. I'll zoom in so you can see that a little better. See these black lines here. If I wanted these clips to be one single clip again, all you have to do is make a selection. So I'm going to select all of the clips that I'd like to join and use the shortcut Command J or Control J on Windows. Now they've been consolidated into one clip. I'll just press undo. Another way you can access a lot of these features that I've spoken about is simply by right-clicking. So don't worry if you ever forget these shortcuts, just right-click and you'll be able to see the options available. See here we've got cut, copy, paste, duplicate, and further down here we've got consolidate. So let's just press Command J now, and they're joined back together. Something else you may have noticed in that drop-down box then was deactivate clip. So this is basically a way to mute clips. The shortcut is simply pressing 0 on your keyboard. I'm going to click on it here, and now it says clip deactivated. So this clip will no longer play back audio. I'll solo this track, and we can now no longer hear anything. I'll just re-engage it by pressing the shortcut 0, and our drums continue. There's a lot of information to be given in one video, but I just wanted to take you through most of the different editing features we can use on audio and MIDI clips. Again, if you forget any of the shortcuts for these features, just right-click on the clip and these drop-down options will appear. As I've seen this, it's just reminded me of one more feature that I wanted to talk about, and that's the loop feature. So, instead of duplicating or copying pasting, we can just loop clips. So, all you've got to do is hover the mouse over the top corner of one of your clips, and when this bracket icon appears, click and drag it. See now, this is looping the clip and extending the length. If I do it at the other end, we can also use this loop feature. One thing to note, you can actually shorten your clips as well if you like using this feature, so I could trim it down. I'm now going to show you some features that are specific to audio editing in the arrangement view. First of all, let's look at fades and crossfades. So these are something you can use on audio clips in the arrangement view. They can be used to blend between two audio clips, or they can be used just to remove any clicks or pops at the end of your audio clip. So if we look at this audio clip we have down here, you may be able to notice when I hover the mouse over it, we get these boxes in each corner. Now, you may also be able to tell there's a slight grayed out section at the beginning and end of the clip. And this is just showing us that that's where our fade is. So by default, fades are automatically added to audio clips on the timeline. This is just stop them clicking or popping. Right, if I play this back, we'll be able to hear this note suddenly gets cut off. Now, if I hover my mouse over this box in the top corner and click and drag over the audio clip, you'll see there we've changed the length of the fade. Now if I play back, you could hear there it was more gradually fading out. If you want to change the shape of the fade, you can do so using this little node in the center. So I could have it very gradually fade and then drop down suddenly, or the opposite. So you can just click and drag this around and find a shape that you like. Now, if you want to change the endpoint of your fade, you can do so using the box in the bottom corner. So if I click and drag on this little box, we can have the fade ending earlier or later. One thing to note, this is different to changing the length of your clip when this bracket icon has appeared. If I were to click and drag and change the length of the clip now, you can see there the fade was actually moving with the clip. I'll just press undo. Whereas if I do it with the little box at the bottom, you'll see there the start point of the fade hasn't actually moved. So depending on what you're doing, having the flexibility to be able to do both of these can be very useful. Now if we go to the start of this audio clip, you'll be able to see we have the exact same options. So if you want to increase the length of the fade, click and drag the top box. You can change the shape by using this node in the center, or choose the starting point of your fade with the box at the bottom. I'll just press undo. Next, I just want to show you how to use a crossfade. So I'm just going to cut this clip into two. I'm going to click to make a selection on my clip and press Command and E or Control E on Windows, and it's cut this clip into two. Now I'm just going to change the length of it and drag these two parts near to each other. So if we play this back, we're jumping suddenly between the two different notes. A crossfade allows you to do this more gradually. A quick way to create a crossfade is select the clips that you'd like to make a crossfade between. So I'll click on one to make a selection, then hold Shift and click on the next clip. Then if I right click on the clip, I can select Create Crossfades on Clip Edges. Or you can use the shortcut Command Option F on a Mac, or Control Alt and F on Windows. Now this has created a crossfade. It's only a very short crossfade at the moment. You can change the length of your crossfade just like a normal fade. So I'll do quite a long crossfade this time. And play this back. So we can hear it gradually blending between the two notes. Listen to how different that sounds to when it's a really short crossfade. So these can be really useful if you want to seamlessly blend between two clips. You can also create a crossfade in a different way. If your clips are right next to each other, like this, see here we've got the fade out and the fade in on the two separate clips. If I click and drag this fade out over to the next clip, that also creates a crossfade. This will only work if the clips are right up next to each other. Again, I can do it the other way by clicking on the fade in and dragging it back over to the previous clip. Also, don't forget you can change the shape of your fade by clicking and dragging on the node in the center. Okay, so that's a handy editing tip. I'm just going to press to undo a few times so this clip goes back to how it was. Now, something else I want to show you is how to time stretch an audio clip on the timeline. Now, the first thing you need to do is open up your sample editor and make sure Warp is selected. If it is, it'll be lit up orange. Now, all you have to do is hover your mouse over the top corner of one of your clips and hold Shift. Now, when you click and drag it, it'll actually time stretch the audio. So if I click and drag it all the way over here, this clip will play back at twice the speed. So if I press undo, you can see there it's time stretched it and it still sounds pretty good. You may need to play around with a different warp mode depending on the type of audio you're working with. However, for now, that sounded fine. Again, if you wanted to slow something down, just hover over one of the top corners, then click and drag. So that's a really handy creative editing feature that you can use in the arrangement view in Ableton Live. Now, one final editing feature that you can use in the arrangement view is reversing audio clips. So I'm just going to shorten this clip once again. I'm going to make it really fast this time. Right, so to reverse an audio clip, simply select the clip that you'd like to reverse, then hit the letter R on your computer keyboard. Or you can reverse it back again. If you like, you can reverse just a small section of an audio clip. So just click and drag over the lower half of an audio clip, then use the shortcut R, and it will reverse just this section. You'll see there it's actually cut this up into two different clips. This doesn't sound particularly interesting on this simple bass note. However, if you have recorded a guitar or a vocal, reversing it can sound really good. So that was just a few quick audio editing features that you can use in the arrangement view in Ableton Live 11. Now I've gone over all the basic skills you need to create music, I'd like to show you how you can export a song out of the software so it can be shared or listened to on other devices. So to export your song, you first need to make a selection of the area that you'd like to export. So in the arrangement view, press Command and A on a Mac or Control A on Windows, and then set your loop with Control L or Command L. Now, one thing you should do, you'll notice that the loop starts at the very beginning here, but it also ends at the very end of our last clip. If I was to play back the very end of this song, I'll just turn my loop off quickly. You'll notice there was a couple of seconds where the final note was ringing out. So if we were to end it at this point here, it'd actually cut off the very end of your track. So just stretch out the end of the loop so it doesn't cut your song short. I'll just play this back and see if that's far enough. Okay, that's plenty. I'm just going to bring that back one bar. Okay, now I'm just going to make sure my loop is active once again. And then I'm going to go up to File, Export Audio/Video. And now this menu will open up. By default, this is the settings that you'll be given. So here, I'm just going to change the file type, so that's a WAV file. This is just the most common type of audio file. The other thing you can do is enable MP3. So this way, you'll have a high quality audio file, which is the WAV file, and then you can also have the lower quality MP3 file if you wanted a smaller file to send around. Okay, that's it. I'd recommend copying these settings and then press Export. Now you can give your audio file a name. So I'm just going to call this Trap Song. And you can choose where you'd like it to be saved. I'm just going to leave it as desktop for now. So Ableton will take a couple of minutes to bounce this audio, and once this is done, you'll be able to find the audio file in your selected destination. Okay, so it's as simple as that. That's how to export a song out of Ableton Live. So, as we mentioned before, this YouTube video is a condensed down version of the first part of our complete Ableton Live course. Here we go over many more topics of music production, such as advanced recording methods, mixing, automation, using Ableton's instruments, warping, audio and MIDI effects, music theory, songwriting tips, and much more. So if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to continue learning with us, then make sure to check out the full course in the link in the description below.